Hello and welcome to my flash presentation. My name is Rachel Booth-Gardiner. I'm an occupational therapist working in mental health, but I also have lived experience of long-term health conditions and disabilities. I'm here today to talk to you about my personal recovery journey and the challenge I now have for the profession. So what happened in 2020, I tested positive for COVID-19 and was admitted to hospital, was later diagnosed with acute pancreatitis. I was very, very unwell in hospital, spent about 5 months in ITU, in and out, was ventilated, was fed through a tube, was nail by mouth for about 5 months, had 7 or 8 surgeries, my body completely deconditioned, I was unable to do anything for myself, and I actually spent a total of 13 months in hospital, and then probably another year and a half at home recovering before I managed to get back to work. So this presentation is going to focus on some of the therapy that I got, particularly occupational therapy, both the good things that happened and the not so good things that happened. So as you can imagine, spending over a year of your life in hospital, I had a lot of interventions from AHPs, allied health professionals, including those that are on the screen there. There's one particular story that I like to tell about a time where I was finding it really difficult to swallow. So the speech and language therapist, the occupational therapist and the physiotherapist all worked together in order for me to be able to have a live x-ray on my swallow. The physio worked with me to be able to sit long enough in a wheelchair that the occupational therapist supplied for me, and then the speech and language therapist had organised the scan. So it was a lovely piece of work that they all had to coordinate with each other and work with me on a shared goal to be able to start to eat and drink again. There were lots of lovely stories and lots of really brilliant interactions from all sorts of staff. There were also some really difficult times and at times kind of barriers that on reflection could be removed. So what were those barriers? I'm going to talk a lot about criteria. I spent probably about 3 months sat on a medical ward waiting for a bed in some sort of rehab unit. Everybody could agree that I needed some sort of rehabilitation, but nobody could agree or accept me onto any of the rehab units in the area because I didn't meet their criteria, because I didn't have a diagnosis that met their criteria. So people argued for about 3 months about who would take me. Eventually, once commissioners got involved and said, look, this person needs some sort of rehabilitation, somebody needs to take them, I was accepted to a unit back nearer home, and I spent the last 3 months of my admission in this newer rehab ward, probably getting less physio than I did on the medical ward, and occupational therapy that wasn't focused on me and my needs. There were set groups that you could attend. So you could go to breakfast group, you could go to a quiz group, did do some individual work with people because it was a brain injury unit. The first interaction I had with an occupational therapist on that ward was around them wanting me to put my socks on. That wasn't a goal that was important to me. I knew that my dressing and washing would come as other things did. Also, the environment on the ward was very inappropriate. The shower space really didn't meet the needs of the people that needed to use it. It used to flood the ward. I often just wanted a quiet place to work on presentations I was writing. There was quite limited sort of thought about what I actually wanted to achieve. It was very much a standard way of doing things. It's also the first time that I spent time in a bay with other women. I'd always been on my own, either in ITU or in a single bay, and it was insightful listening to other people's thoughts about the physiotherapy that they'd just been through, or particularly had a lady next to me who had a brain injury. She just couldn't understand what the occupational therapist was doing with her. Felt very tested all of the time, and actually if they'd just spent a little bit of time explaining why they were following her to the shops and why they wanted her to do certain things, I think she would have engaged a lot more. Then it came to discharge, and the physiotherapists told me that they couldn't refer me to community physio until I'd been discharged. There was a waiting list for community physio, so I'd spent 3 months having fairly intensive physiotherapy to be discharged, to be sat on a waiting list, to then wait, I think about 8 weeks before a physio came out to see me. So you can imagine what happened. I kind of went back quite a bit. The occupational therapist sorted out some bits of the equipment for me to go home, but not all of it. Then I had to have a specialist, one that came out to do seating, another one that came out to do the wheelchair, then another one that came out to do reablement. But at first they were like, oh, because I was being hoisted at the time, we don't work with people that are being hoisted, so we have to wait until you're not being hoisted anymore, and then we'll come out again. And just kind of lots and lots of health professionals involved, and it got really, really complicated. And often it'd be me or my mum that would be having to try and remember what each one was doing and saying, and kind of ringing up and chasing. Felt quite chaotic, and it didn't feel goal orientated, and it didn't feel like they were interested in the occupations that I wanted and needed to do. It was standardized things that they did routinely rather than think of me as an individual. As a challenge, I want you to really think and reflect upon the interventions that you're doing with someone. Are they meeting the needs of that person? Are they about what they want to do, what they need to do? Whose goals are they? Are they the client's goals, or are they the service's goals, particularly focused on discharge? Your clinical reasoning, what's that about? Is that about delivering services that you've got the resources for, or is it about delivering services for what the person needs, interventions of what the person needs? It's very much thinking about, are we doing the right interventions with people at the right time? And maybe things might cost more to begin with, but in the long term, are they the best things for the person? So I've had lots of time to think and reflect about occupational therapy services and health and social care services as a whole. And I think my main reflection is that we are trying to deliver a holistic service that thinks about the person at the centre in a wider service that doesn't, a wider service that is diagnostic led rather than needs led. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we focused on what the needs of people were rather than if they met particular criteria depending on their diagnosis? And what if I just had the one occupational therapist that followed me throughout my journey and was there at every stage to be able to think about how we could change and adapt the occupations I needed to, wanted to, and were required to do, and got me back to work, perhaps a little bit faster than I did. Really breaking down those barriers that we have within services, that's all about what criteria people meet rather than what are the things that they need to be able to live the life that they want to live. We might change lives, and we might be much better at giving a true meaning to a person's life. And this is a picture of me achieving one of my goals of walking down the aisle on my wedding day, no matter how I did it. And it was a beautiful day. Thank you for listening. I only had 10 minutes, so I hope that this made some sort of sense and has given you something to reflect upon.